consultant and founder of TowerScope. Now, when you're leading global or international teams, some of the things that I personally wonder about is what are some essential human skills of leading across cultures? Are there some human aspects that are important in any workplace? Are there differences? And especially if you're going to lead different people across different cultures, we're going to explore these and more with our guest on this episode. So let me introduce him. Thomas Gelmi is an executive coach who has advised leaders and teams for over 20 years, reaching 10,000 participants across 90 countries. Working in 4 languages, his clients include global corporations, subject matter experts, and individuals worldwide. His varied background includes serving as a Maître de Cabine at Swissair, as a operations director at an international leadership development company, and as a trained caregiver for crisis victims. He's a member of the Forbes Coach Council and resides near Zurich, Switzerland. So welcome to the show, Thomas.
Thank you very much for having me as a guest. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Great to have you. And are you in Switzerland right now as we're...
Yes.
Yes.
I am. And spring is coming. So everybody is happy and the days are getting longer and warmer and the sun is out. So all good.
Yeah. Sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. Well, let's start with your career. I was very intrigued by one of your experiences as a Maître de Cabine at Swissair. For those of you who don't know, for our audience, what does that role entail?
Well, in most airlines across the globe, the function is called purser or in-flight manager, cabin crew manager, right? At Swissair, it's called Maître de Cabine. It's basically the person who leads cabin crew on board aircrafts. So responsible for everything that happens behind the cockpit door. The flight deck is responsible for everything that happens in front of the cockpit door and the entire flight, of course. Passenger safety, but also service quality, what most passengers are more aware of, right? But mainly passenger safety. It's a leadership role. And I learned a lot during that time that I still use, that I still benefit from in my daily work today. Yeah.
I bet it's such an interesting role. I didn't know about it. I personally had to look it up. I Googled it before we chatted. So I knew where you were going to go with purser, but I would never have known had I not Googled it. I would love to hear more about, first of all, how did you get into that kind of role? That's such an interesting experience. And then also, what did you learn that can apply to some of the things that we're going to be talking about today?
Okay. So how did I get into becoming a flight attendant for an airline? Because that was the starting point. That was in my mid-20s when I was in a phase of not really knowing what to do with my life, honestly. So I was job hopping, trying out things, always looking for the one thing that is a perfect match for me, for my profile, for my competencies, what I can bring to any job, right? And it was the first time that I really felt like arriving. Oh, wow, I can use my language skills. I can use my people skills, my interest in traveling, in cultures and exploring the world, etc. And also my, let's say, talent for serving, right? Or the interest of serving others. And so I started as a flight attendant and then worked my way up and became a Maître de Cabine or a purser. And what did I learn that is still beneficial for me today and for my clients, of course? Well, you see, you're in a narrow tube, in a confined space, high up in the sky with, let's say, 300 people, depending on aircraft size. And you have 3 things happening in that confined space simultaneously. You have customer contact, customer interaction, right? You have teamwork, teams working in various sections of the plane together, and you have leadership. So one person or multiple people leading or having a leading role in that system, right? And all of that is happening in a very tight, narrow space in an unusual situation for most people. Still, many people, even though air travel has become a commodity, are still somewhat nervous when boarding
Mhm.
a plane or flying a plane. Plus, when so many people are together, problems will arise, sooner or later. Tension will happen, conflicts may happen, irritations may happen, friction may happen. And so a main task of cabin crew is also to recognize, anticipate these things, and intervene in a de-escalating manner,
Mhm.
because you cannot call for outside help. The police won't come.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
have to solve the issues on the spot as early as possible, as quickly as possible, and by maintaining the relationship.
Mm.
You shouldn't escalate, right?
Mhm.
Of course, there are exceptions, and the number, unfortunately, of unruly passengers has increased massively over the recent years and decades. So, in some cases, you just have to solve it and, disregard the relationship. But in most cases, you want to keep that relationship and solve the issue at the same time. So, it requires social skills. It requires a combination of personal and interpersonal competence. The ability to deal with people, the ability to connect quickly with other human beings, build rapport, build trust, build relationship, and keep it under difficult conditions or circumstances. And the basis for that are personal competencies, as in,
Mm.
you know, being in a good relationship with yourself, emotional intelligence, emotional self regulation, and all of what comes with that. So it is often underestimated what that profession requires and demands of people.
Absolutely. I mean, uh, you just beautifully described how these soft skills are not soft at all. They're incredibly, incredibly hard to develop. It's easy to lose your cool, go
Yeah.
off on someone, call the police, whatever that is. And in this kind of environment, you have to have the strongest interpersonal and um, emotional intelligence skills in
Mm,
order to keep things at that, sort of like de-escalating or not at least not escalating, um, keep things calm, keep the trust, right? All of those things require an
yes.
incredible number of
Mm,
capacities.
mm.
So I'd love to hear more about um, kind of how you see all of these kind of capacities. Why would they be important to translate outside of the cockpit, outside of the tube, the plane, and into the business world?
Why would it be important to multiply or clone these
Yes,
skills in a
yes,
non-flying environment? All right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
first of all, I guess you and I do agree on
We
the
do
fact
agree.
that soft skills
Yeah.
is not really helping as a term, because it has a somewhat less important flavor compared to the hard facts and the hard factors and the numbers and the facts and the figures in organizations, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes I hear things like, yeah, and maybe towards the end of the year, we'll also do a soft skill training if we still
Mm,
have budget
mm,
for that.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So it's often seen as something that, yeah, it's more nice to have than really, really important. And really important would be intellectual intelligence and subject matter expertise and all these things. When in fact, experience shows and numerous studies and research show that it's emotional intelligence that is most of the time or very often the game changer that makes all the difference. So that's the business case. Why is it worth investing in the development of this kind of skills? Well, first of all, the question arises, why would we invest money and time and energy in developing things that, if you think about them for 5 minutes, you would say are common sense? Well, most of the things I focus on in my work could be seen as just common sense. Of course, if somebody talks to you, you should be listening. Common sense. And you should be listening to understand what the person is trying to tell you. Common sense. You should treat people with respect. Common sense, right? And the list goes on and on and on. Now, why do we have to talk about this? Well, because if we look into organizations and we observe how people work together and how people lead others, common sense is often not so common. And that's the crucial point. You see, all these interpersonal skills and the personal competencies, they come more naturally when we are in a known environment that we're familiar with, that we feel comfortable in, and that we feel safe in. Empathy, interestingly, is quite limited to the inner circle most of the time, our friends and family. And that's where it comes naturally, right? When you go out with your best friend for dinner and you talk about life, of course, you're interested and you listen deeply because you want to know and because you care. So empathy comes natural. Now, in a business environment, if you have to have a different conversation about an unpleasant topic with someone you don't really like, empathy might not come so natural. Empathy might have to be a decision you make, right? To see maybe the needs and the interests of that person and try to understand where they're coming from with their standpoint first, instead of insisting to be understood and that your point is the right point, right? Which end up in a debate, and there's a winner and there's a loser. So it doesn't come so naturally in an environment where pressure is high. We have to perform, we have to deliver. And because the managers are under pressure, very often they pass on that pressure to their people, to their teams, no filter, just they fully pass it on. And that's why in today's environment in which most people operate, most people tend to be outside of their comfort zone most of the time and in a elevated state of stress, hypervigilance, anxiousness, anxiety. So yeah, mental health issues are on the rise, burnout is on the rise. These are all reasons or symptoms of not having these topics and skills developed well enough. And yeah, focusing on the people instead of the numbers will increase the numbers.
Right. And, I think, yes, it's common sense, but there's lots of common sense that we know and we don't do, right? Like we know we should be healthy, but then we don't do things to make us healthy. We know we should be active, but then we don't regularly practice being active, right? The soft skills, quote unquote, or these kind of like emotional intelligence skills take the same amount of intentionality, effort, practice, daily practice, and especially even more so when you're under pressure, like you said. And someone who has been through lots and lots of training, working under high pressure, on an airplane knows this for sure, that the worst things that, could happen if you don't practice and attend to these skills. So we are nearing an ad break. And when we come back, let's kind of learn more about, do these differ across nations, across cultures, and what have you seen? You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Thomas Gelmi. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At that time, you can find us live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, several other locations at talkradio.nyc. And we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Thomas Gelmi. So, Thomas, you speak 4 languages. If I saw online correctly, that's French, German, English, Italian.
Yes, exactly.
Correct? Okay.
And also Swiss German, which is a German dialect, which makes it 5.
Oh, Swiss German also. Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that was a dialect, but that makes sense. Yes. So 5, 4.5 languages.
Exactly, 4.5.
And your last name, you told me, is actually Italian, Gelmi.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you've worked with leaders across 90 countries. That's a lot. I'm looking at your website here, and it's literally across, globally. What have you learned about these kind of skills? You started talking about how, under pressure, under a lot of stress, under a heightened, sort of like hypervigilance response, which is something that I've sort of focused on with trauma and stress and that kind of thing. We are not our very best. It's very hard for us to slow down and stop ourselves and use all of these skills. But I also start wondering, with all the experiences that you've had, does it look differently working with different cultures? Are there nuances that leaders need to be thinking about when they're working with different cultures and these skills?
Yes, so there are differences, cultural differences, of course, as we all know, and there are similarities. So let me maybe start with the similarities and then get to the differences. So if we take one step back and ask ourselves, what is leadership really about, right? Leadership is influence, as John Maxwell said, nothing more, nothing less. And in today's world, we don't need people like in the past who do what we tell them to do. We need people who do what we don't tell them to do. Because we can't oversee everything and know everything and then give directions. We need people who think for themselves, who self-organize, who are enthusiastic about what needs to be done, who go extra miles. or there's this beautiful quote by Dwight Eisenhower who said, "Leadership is the art of getting people or getting someone to do what needs to be done because they want to do it."
That's a
So,
good one.
how do we lead in such a way that people do what needs to be done because they want to do it?
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
that's the question of the century, Thomas.
yes, that's the question of a century, and it is actually very easy to answer. There's a very simple answer to it. It's about how people feel. It's about the climate you create as a leader. Do you create a climate of psychological threat and danger where people are constantly outside of their window of tolerance, outside in a stress mode? Is that how you lead? Leading by fear? Well, then you generate a different emotional state, and people will very likely be doing the bare minimum that they have to do so that they don't run into trouble, right? There will be mistrust, there will be pushback, there will be silo thinking, and all of that as a logical consequence. Now, if you create a climate of psychological safety, a climate that is characterized by mutual support, respect, appreciation, and safety and trust, where everybody feels safe enough to speak up, to say, "Hey guys, I have a different opinion. If 9 other people in the meeting have the same opinion and you differ," to speak up. I see it differently. To admit a mistake, to say, "Hey guys, I made a wrong decision. I made a mistake. I need your help." And you will not be criticized in front of others. You will not be ridiculed. You will not be made fun of. You will be asked, "How can we support you?" That's a completely different story, and people will be in a completely different emotional state, a different baseline of emotions, how they show up at work. You know, someone said the culture of your organization you can recognize by how people feel on Sunday evening with regards to Monday. So
Right.
I call this the emotional balance sheet. What's the emotional balance sheet in your organization in general, but also in your people, in your relationships with your team and individual members of your team? Is it predominantly positive? And then people will go extra miles because it's just logically necessary, and they will do what is needed. They will support each other. They will trust each other. And the magic can happen, really. Or is it predominantly negative? And then all the things we see as a consequence that I just mentioned earlier. Now, this principle that can also be, explained neuroscientifically, neurobiologically. This principle is valid across the globe. It's the same for everyone, for all human beings around the globe. If I feel well, if I feel safe, if I feel respected and my contribution counts, I will behave differently and often in the way or in the interests of the company and their customers. And if I don't, I will focus on myself, on my needs, on my self-protection, etc., etc. Valid across the globe. Now, how we create this climate, what kind of leadership behavior or leadership style will create that positive emotional balance sheet differs from culture to culture.
Interesting. Before we get to that,
Yes.
let me just make a few comments here. Because, I think what you bring up is so, so, so important. We can think about this even if, for those of you who know about Maslow's hierarchy, right? What's at the very, very bottom? It is safety, security, shelter, food, all the basics, right? Humans need those basics in order for them to be ready for the next levels, which is love, belonging, self-esteem, and then being our very best. We can't be our very best without all the other stuff at the bottom there, right? And unfortunately, our brains are wired to always focus on, am I afraid? Am I under threat? Am I not feeling secure? And if so, I'm going to focus there and I'm not going to work on anything else. And so if you have a leader who is setting the stage for fear, for threat, for intimidation, punishment, all of these, like if they work on your base instincts, what are you going to react to? Your base instincts. And you are not going to be your very best, and you're not going to produce your very best at the very top of that pyramid, right? And sadly, we see a lot of leaders right now in politics and beyond who are grabbing right at that base instinct stuff, and we are feeding right into it. And what you're saying, which I think will speak to a lot of people, is we all desperately need leaders who help us feel like we don't have to worry about that sort of lower level protective, safety stuff, that we want the next level. We want to feel belonging, respect, supported, so we can function at our very best. And those are the leaders that are going to get us to the very top of that pyramid. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the leaders that lead like that have this calm composure and radiate confidence and optimism, as in, we're going to come out of this the other end okay, and we're going to make it, even if it looks terrible at the moment. These kind of leaders are leaders that did the work on themselves, that have high emotional intelligence with regards to their own emotions, that are self-aware, that are conscious, that are able to self-regulate and self-care, so that they can then be there for others fully.
Right. And for those of you who are listening, just think about the amount of effort that it takes to be at that level, to be your very best for other people, to be that sort of able to understand yourself in order to create that kind of environment. It doesn't just happen. Like you said, this is like, yes, it's common sense, but it doesn't just happen automatically. It takes practice and effort.
Yes.
So
it takes some humility and discipline and courage.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let's hear about, actually, you know what? We're getting close to an ad break. So I'm going to keep people on the edge of their seat. And after we get back from the ad break, we will hear about, like, now, how do you apply that? What do you see across cultures that might be different? Even though, what we talk about now are kind of like the sort of what we all share in common as humans. So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Thomas Gelmi. We are on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. at talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Thomas Gelmi. So, Thomas, how do you apply all of this across different cultures? What do you see as differences?
Yes. So, how do we create a climate in which people feel comfortable and safe and perform in different cultures? That's the question. This differs because we see, of course, differences in various areas when we compare cultures. One of the main differences that often becomes obvious is the way we communicate. Communication style, which is a spectrum. On the far end, on one far end, we have direct communication style, telling it as it is, speaking up, saying what you mean. On the other far end of the spectrum, we have indirect communication. And so if we put that on, spectrum on a globe, we could have one end, for example, in North America, direct, speaking up, saying also, I did this, and being proud, etc. And on the other far end, we might end up in Southeast Asia, with the countries allocated there, where you would not directly say if you disagree. You would not directly challenge someone, by far not a leader, for example, right? So you would communicate more indirectly. And people who are used to that and who know it and who learn to read between the lines in that specific context can understand and pick up on the subtleties that are maybe hidden between the lines. That's one difference. Another one is individuality versus collectivism. Again, with the same countries as comparing poles, right? North America and many Western societies are strongly or have become strongly individualistic, whereas many countries still in the Middle East and Asia are strongly collectivistic, where the community and the collective has the higher priority than the individual. And then a third one, which very strongly applies to leadership, is so-called power distance. Hierarchy. To what extent do I, as a team member, as an employee, expect my boss to tell me what to do and have all the answers and solutions, and I really look up because there is a hierarchical, asymmetric situation, which again is the case, for example, in China. And on the other end, a low power distance, for example, in Switzerland. Even in Switzerland, compared to Germany, we have lower power distance. We have very flat hierarchies in general, a very strong involvement, participation of people even in really decision making, right? So these are some of the differences. And in order to lead effectively in these different cultural environments, again, a leader has to do the work and learn the differences, learn to understand what people need so that they feel comfortable and at ease, and what might irritate. Because if you don't learn the differences, if you don't show interest so that you can understand, you might just assume that what made you successful as a successful leader in this context will also make you a successful leader in the other context. Speaking up, giving direct feedback, challenging people made me a successful, effective leader in this maybe home context. Now, I'm moving to another country as an expat for 4 years, and I don't do the work, and I show up the same way and will create irritations in no time, and then be surprised what's happening, right?
Yeah. I have kind of a challenging or tough question for you. I'm curious to see what you think about this. So even within one country or one culture, we have seen now lots of challenging the status quo. So, for example, normally in the US, we sort of have defined leadership as direct, clear and prideful, loud, charismatic. The individuality, is clear as a culture, right? And at the same time, we have subcultures that don't do well with that. Or
Yes.
we have leaders who could bring a lot to an organization that are very different in their style. They might
Yes.
bring a more collectivist, shared decision-making kind of style. They might bring a much more, humble, introverted style. And that might be exactly what is needed for this time. But that is such a culture change and culture shift that we don't know necessarily what to do either with the culture or the leader. And I'm curious your thoughts about that.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you asked the question because yes, very often, or in general, in today's environment with the challenges we're facing, leadership traits and leadership qualities would be more effective and would be important, that are often more on the silent end and not on the loud end. Humility, you mentioned, listening, asking the right questions, and then being quiet and hearing what's there and listening to people, being the last person in the meeting who adds their 2 cents, not the first one. And you see the magic happen when you give space to people and invite them to share. But anyways, yes, that would be important. Now, what does it take for change to occur? The first step is always awareness. Awareness that the way we're going is not the best way, and it might not lead to what we're looking for. And there would be other ways available if we activate them or give them more space, more room. It would be very helpful. This awareness has to be there in the first place. No awareness, no change. No awareness, no problem awareness. Awareness for the fact that what we're doing and the way we're doing it is not helping. It might have been a good or appropriate leadership style a century ago in the industrial age, command and control. Yeah, that's where it originates from. In today's environment, you're not effective like that. And you're actually you're turning people off, you're demotivating. I just posted on TikTok, I made a post stating the main reasons why good people leave a company. It went through the roof and people were commenting, my company, that's exactly what I'm experiencing. That's why I left, etc., etc., etc. So awareness is first. And the challenge with that is that I often see in my coaching practice, working with leaders and doing executive coaching, that these people are successful. Depending on the criteria you use to measure success, mostly they can be seen as successful. They made it to a certain position in an organization, very often high up. So look where I am today.
Right.
Can't be that wrong what I'm doing, can it?
Right.
That's often the attitude. So why change? Do I need a coach? Why should I change? So that's the challenge. There's no awareness. There's no problem awareness. And I often use tools, specific tools to raise this awareness. The leader has to say yes to that and have the humility to say, okay, it might be that I have some room for development. Let's see. And then what I often conduct is a 360-degree feedback process, which is an instrument for a structured collection of feedback of the most important stakeholders of that leader that work with him or her and that are directly affected by his or her leadership style. And it is done in an anonymized way so that people who give feedback are protected and they know it's safe. I can really say what I like about that leader, but also what I would wish to be different, what I would wish them to start doing or very often stop doing, because it demotivates us, right? And it doesn't allow us to bring out our full potential. And that's collected, generated in an anonymized report. And then I sit with the leader and we look at it together. And sometimes it's a wake-up call. And if that person has the necessary humility, we can start working. And it's amazing what can happen if someone has the humility, the courage, and the discipline to say, okay, hey, what got me here might not be what gets me there. And so let's start.
Yeah. And I think your comment about awareness of a problem is critical for all of this to happen. It's the, or at the very least, curiosity. Can we do even better than we're doing now? Because I've been successful, and I've made a difference, and I've gotten to this point. And if you're curious about being even more successful, doing even better, getting the most out of your people, maybe you might be curious enough just to, receive additional information about what could be different, what could change.
Yeah. If you cannot make someone change something that they don't consider a problem.
Yes, absolutely.
And people don't change for others. People change for themselves. So when they see that there's really something in it for them, more effective leadership, more impact, or less effort for the impact, that's usually, an invitation.
Yeah. We're reaching an ad break, but I'm curious if you have any quick thoughts about what about the flip? Leaders who have all of these amazing kind of listening, emotional regulation, emotional intelligence skills, but they're much more like quiet, introverted leaders.
Yes.
And it's hard for them to just be recognized and visible for those strengths. Any thoughts about sort of like what it takes for them to be just visible for those strengths?
Yeah. Increase your visibility by showing up, by speaking up. Learn how to also behave in certain ways that may not be your comfort zone. Yeah. Everybody has their stretching zone, their development zone. For the less empathetic, hard facts, result-oriented leader, the stretching zone might be to show more empathy and show that you care for people. The other way around, for the more reserved and empathetic leader, the stretching zone might be to learn how to also show dominance, for example, when it's necessary, because in some situations it is necessary to be directive and clear. So I call it increasing your personal behavioral repertoire, your toolbox.
Yeah.
Are you able to also lean into other behaviors that don't come so naturally because of you've learned how to do it in baby steps?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, we are reaching another ad break. When we come back, I'd love to sort of explore just the greatest challenges, trends, lessons learned across cultures that you are seeing as important for leaders to focus on. So we're reaching an ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Thomas Gelmi. We will come back in just a moment.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the hard skills. All right, we have Thomas Gelmi here for just a little while longer, and I would love to hear, out of all of sort of the different groups of people that you've worked with across all of the different countries, different types of cultures, individualistic versus collectivistic, humility versus pride, indirect versus direct. What are the most sort of common challenges or trends or skills that have been kind of hardest to teach or help leaders with when it comes to expanding their behavioral repertoire?
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful question. Thank you. Well, the biggest challenge to start with is often to understand that different is not wrong. It's just different. And it's just as right. It's just as valid as how we do things around here, right? Culture can be described as the way we do things around here. And here might be different from how they do things over there, but it's their way of doing things right. And you see, for this diversity to be experienced, you don't have to travel the globe anymore. It happens in front of your doorstep. Meanwhile, we have such culturally diverse societies, right? That, for example, many leaders in a globalized world have to lead culturally mixed virtual teams. Leading virtual teams is already challenge enough, but then you also have people in that virtual team sitting in various corners of the world and with different cultural background. So diversity can be a challenge. Differences can be a challenge. And they can be both at the same time. They can be fertile ground for conflict, friction, tension, misunderstanding, pushback, conflict. Or they can be fertile ground for enrichment, for a team becoming more than the sum of its elements, because we're working together and we're integrating the differences. We're not only understanding them, we're not only accepting them or tolerating them, we are integrating the best of all worlds. So this basic understanding of diversity, of differences as being an asset, actually, is sometimes already a first challenge to overcome. And then understanding that the difference or the differentiating factor, whether it leads to conflict or enrichment, is the willingness to understand these differences. And that's probably the biggest challenge that I see, that people don't take the necessary time and space to understand the differences, to make it even possible to understand the differences. Teams are put together, interculturally mixed teams are put together and then go. And they have to perform immediately, right? And then in meetings, if one person doesn't speak up that much, doesn't participate that much, you ask yourself, what's wrong with them? Well, they might just not be used to that based on their cultural background. They may feel uneasy taking space to speak and share their ideas if the space is not being given to them, right? For example, right? So then we can have a situation where we're in a meeting with 10 people, and guess who speaks the most? It's those that are comfortable speaking up, those that are used to taking the space to articulate their thoughts. That's what happens. So the solution to that is, again, awareness that there are differences and that different people might need different things and might be irritated by different things. But if we don't find out, there's nothing we can do about it. We cannot work with it. You know, Sir John Whitmore, who was a pioneer in the coaching industry, said, we can only control what we're aware of. What we're not aware of often controls us or the situation. But it's like the elephant in the room. If we don't see it, it's there. And it has a huge influence on the quality of the collaboration and the meeting and the outcome. But if we're not aware of it, we cannot do anything about it. So awareness empowers you. On a very practical level, my suggestion would be to, when a team is brought together in one of the first meetings, address it. Have a short 1 or 2 hour session where you only talk about what do I need to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to trust enough that I can show up and speak up. What do I need for that? So that I take the space to talk, to participate. What are some of my triggers based on my cultural backgrounds? What would irritate me if somebody does it? If somebody criticizes me in front of others? That's a huge trigger for many, right? And then you have it on the surface, you have it on the table, and then you can decide together how you're going to deal with that. And you can come up with a little team manifesto or some rules and regulations that you develop together for how do we want to work together here? How do we want to treat each other? What are some of the, things we can do to help each other bring out the best in us?
Yeah, I love that. And I would add to that also that even talking about how humans have shortcuts in order to determine who's safe, who's not safe, who's in, who's out, causes us to believe that if there is a difference, that person is not right or not safe, right? And we could probably talk about that for a while, but I'm also realizing that we're reaching the closing of our time together. I can't believe we've gotten this far, and I want to talk with you more, but we're not going to be able to. Maybe next time. So I'm curious, what's one thing that you want people to take away from all of the things that we've talked about today?
Yeah, the main thing I would love people to take away is to understand that it all begins with ourselves. So that we have to do the work and not assume that everybody's the same. Everybody's as we are. And, start from where you are, get some support. One of my favorite quotes is by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, what we all need the most is someone who can bring out the best in us. And this can be a coach or a friend or a boss,
or all of them. Yeah.
Or all of them, because we can grow and develop through self-reflection only up to a certain point, up to the point where we reach our blind spots and cannot think around the corner unless someone asks a good question, for example.
That's
right?
right.
So
That's right.
invest in your self-development.
Yeah, excellent. And if they want to work with you or find out more about you, I'm sharing it here for those of you who are going to be watching, and also to find Thomas, you go to Gelmi, GELMI.coach / you can find out more with, / EN / who is Thomas Gelmi with hyphens, but Gelmi.coach. All right, everybody. You've heard a lot from Thomas today. What is one takeaway that you will take away from today, and one small change that you would implement this week based on what you learned from Thomas? I hope one of those is going to be the aha that we are all different, and it's worth understanding, taking the time to understand these differences, right? Whatever it is that you picked up on and that you decide to adjust and implement this week, share it with us on LinkedIn. Share it with us at Thomas Gelmi, at Mira Brancu, at talkradio.nyc, so we could cheer you on. Talkradio.nyc and the Hard Skills podcast is also available on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all over the place. If today's episode resonated with you, share it, leave a review. And if also you're looking for more personalized support and working with me, you can head to gotowerscope.com. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. Together, we'll navigate the complexities of leadership and emerge stronger on the other side. Thank you for joining me and Thomas Gelmi today on this journey. This is Dr. Mira Brancu signing off. Until next time, stay steady, stay present, and keep building those hard skills. Take care, everybody.